recording again. I'm also going to share my screen with you guys as I have such a good presentation that I'm so excited to have made. Give me a second while all of the images load because there's a lot. All right. And we got, also thank you for bearing with me that we're on Zoom and that we're doing two different fun sessions of 40-minute time periods, but I am a poor young adult. So awesome. Let's get down into it. Well, thank you all for being here in general. I'm super excited that we're able to have class. This is Film Photo LNK, our first class. Film 101, of course. If it was 102, that would be a little strange. But we're just excited that you guys are all here. Just as an introduction, I am Allison. I'm a recent graduate of Wesleyan. I got my BFA with an emphasis in photography, which is why I love it so much. And I really like to look into the idea of memory and how our identity is tied into ways that we kind of build up identity through archives and like understandings of our spatial awareness and like who we are as people is kind of dictated by those spaces and what's around us, and documenting it through photography. Here's a diptych that I did over the past couple years called Learning to Take a Compliment. It is done with film. Ooh, fancy. Just kidding. This is pretty much all going to be film. So that is that. So just to start off, this is a little bit of history of photography. Like I said, please do not worry. There's not going to be a quiz. It's just a little bit of history because it's, I don't know, we're talking about photography. Why not learn a little bit of history? So the first photos were created in 1820, but they weren't actually able to like be transferred onto a physical surface until 1827, which is going to be shown in these top two photos of the metal plate that it was transferred on. This photo took like 8 hours to make. And it was just of a scene outside somebody's window. But this was created by using a technique called camera obscura, which is essentially creating a room that is completely blocked off other than one opening, where the image from that wall is then able to go through that opening and then be basically just projected onto the farther wall. But when it's projected, it's going to be flipped upside down. Very similar to how we see within our eye, if you know the like science behind that and how lenses work in eyes, it's basically the same method. But camera obscura, this technique has been known for centuries, but it was never actually being able to be applied to create photos until 1820s, where this photo, even though it took 8 hours to make, it was soon changed into a daguerreotype, which daguerreotypes were created by the friend of the first photographers, Louis Daguerre, who was able to take photos within just a matter of mere minutes. So the one on the far left is a daguerreotype that was created in the 1800s, but daguerreotypes soon fell out of fashion because it was expensive, it was really hard to do, and took a lot more time. And this is when the beginning of film really started to develop into different kinds of photography. So there's a lot of different kinds of film photography. We're only going to be talking about one and only doing one because we only really have access to one at the moment, but there's different types such as tintype, cyanotypes, daguerreotypes. I'm going to butcher this because I always do. Albumin prints. There we go, albumin prints. And then just gelatin silver prints as well. Gelatin silver prints is probably what you see a lot more nowadays if you're in a museum or in galleries. But all of these can be still created nowadays, including the one in the middle that was made in 1999. So it's younger than I am. And then the one on the far right, which is actually a photographer who is in Lincoln or Omaha, but works primarily with portraits and taking photos with tintypes on wet plate collodion. If you want to know more about these kinds, I can lead you in directions to be able to learn more. little bit complicated and need more equipment than we currently have. But literally, I know so many people that love to do these. So, and I would also like to preface, if you have questions, just interrupt me and I would love to help you answer them and do whatever I can. Seriously, go for it. But moving on, there's a lot of different kinds of photography, a lot of different kinds of cameras, and a lot of different kinds of film. It can be overwhelming, and I completely understand. But luckily, we are only going to be doing one, which we are going to be doing film with 35 millimeter film. And specifically for class, we're going to be doing black and white. So when it comes to cameras, I want to remind you that like we have access to cameras all the time with our phones. And so it's like okay to take the same kind of photos that you would take on your phone with a phone camera. But I'm also going to be showing you some different types of photography that maybe will spark your interest. And we're going to be just doing 35 millimeter film, even though there is medium format, there's 120 Polaroid, which you guys have probably heard of, in Instax, which is the like most popular form of Polaroid film at the moment. A lot of people actually have those cameras. But we have people in our Discord that do these different types of photos. These are all photos at the bottom from our Discord where we've talked about fixing cameras, being able to like use different cameras. The one on the far left is actually, that's a camera that you own, Joe, right? Yeah?
No, that's the one that Jacob's buying right now.
Okay, that's the one that Jacob's getting. Joe owns a camera that's like 20 pounds.
It's gross.
So
Yeah. It's like, Colin, you've seen that giant camera. You know the one.
it's
Awesome.
really huge.
Oh yeah, it's huge. But it's really fun. It's a giant medium format camera. It's called the Fuji GX680, and it just takes a very, very large negative.
Yeah. And you can, I mean, you can get negatives. Don't get mad at me, Joe. I'm going to pull out a negative strip that is not protected. These are going to be what our negatives look like. This is a negative strip. If I hold it up to light, you can actually see them better. But you can get negatives that are half that size, double that size, triple that size. It really just depends on what kind of camera you use. But don't worry about it. If you're too stressed about it, it's okay. You don't have to know all of that information at the moment. So the most important part about photography is light. Literally, if we can't have any kind of light, we can't take photos. Just as if I turned off my light in here and there's no daylight, you wouldn't be able to see anything. So we need to be able to have light to be able to take photos. There's a lot of different kinds of light sources. And I'm a really big fan of light in general and kind of documenting it. Also, as a preface, the majority of photos from here on out are actually going to be my own. So you can always ask questions about them, as well as just clarifying anything that needs to be said. So different kinds of light include sunlight, diffused lighting, artificial, reflected, direct, studio, ambient, tungsten versus fluorescent, which are two kinds of light bulbs, the like super yellow kinds, which like the light that's like this, or fluorescent, which are the super blue and really annoying kinds. But what's really important to know is how much light you have. So by having more light, it's easier to take photos. By having less light, you're gonna kind of have to understand how to take photos and understand some of the concepts and the specific settings that you have to have on your camera, which I'm going to be able to be explained. But what's important is that you need to be able to kind of understand where your light's coming from and how to access it and actually use it within photos. So this is just an example of literally all of the different kinds of light that there can be. Anywhere from going just from top over, bottom over is just having direct sunlight, then having diffused lighting with fog, and then having the far right one is going to be refracted light through glass as well as direct light onto the glass. Then down at the bottom is direct light through a window. And then bottom middle is my favorite kind of lighting, which is reflected light. So reflected light can come from a mirror, it can come from glass, it can come from a lot of different sources. But my favorite is like a building having sun shining down on it and then it reflecting light back down onto a subject matter. So it's not direct, but it's still like very glowy, if you want to say. And then the far right bottom one is diffused and reflected off of the surface of the water. So just kind of taking note of light is a good process to kind of start doing. But what's important when it comes to photography, especially film photography, is that you need to know settings. I'm assuming the majority of your guys' cameras don't have an like auto flash, auto focus, auto everything else. So a lot of this is going to be in the hands of you guys. You get to choose how you take photos, but we also want you to be able to have a roll of film that you can actually see, and there are photos that are legible and like you can see on them instead of having just a whole roll that's black or a whole roll that's white. So of course we want to be able to explain these settings. The two main settings, also if you would like to take notes, you can. I'm going to give you guys access to this. And also I'm always here to answer questions, and so is Joe. But the two main settings that you guys are going to need to know is shutter speed and your aperture. Usually you'll also need to know what the ISO and the film sensitivity is. But luckily, since we are shooting on film, that's dictated by your roll of film that you're going to put in. So you can't change it from shot to shot unless you're changing your roll, but we'll only be shooting with one roll at the time being. So to get like into the film sensitivity, there's a lot of different kinds of film sensitivity. The most common usually ranging from 100 to about 1600 or so. We're going to be using 100. So the basic concept of film sensitivity is that more sensitive to light means that there's going to be more grain, but it can use less light. So the higher the number, so say 1600, it's going to be more grainy, but more sensitive to light, meaning you can use it in lower light situations. The lower the number, such as 100, like we're going to be using, the less grainy it is, and the less sensitive it is, which means that it needs more light to be able to have a legible photo. So like I said, we'll be using Kodak T-Max 100. It's a black and white film. It's pretty good, but there's also a lot of different kinds of film that we can be able to explore later on. We just want to be able to give you guys access to all a standard kind of film. Yes, Joe?
Allison, your mic's doing something.
What? Can you guys hear me
Is that
though?
just me? Is it just me that's having a mic issue?
Yeah. Joe, I think it's just you. I'm gonna get some water though. My giant jug.
I fixed it. That's me. My bad.
Dad, you good? Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Awesome. Nice. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the note.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're fine. So on the example of having a lower film sensitivity, these were all shot, I believe, with either a 200 or a 400 film, which means that as you can look closer in the photos, you really see no film grain. Film grain can be from anything that like looks like physical grains to fuzziness in a photo. Lauren, this is kind of the same concept of ISO in general, of noise in pictures. So I know that you know what that is. But it's just a little bit more crisp and clear of a picture. So going on to the opposite end of the spectrum, we have higher ISOs, which is going to be, I think these were done with 800, 1600, and then 3200 for those two far ones, the concert photos. As you can see visible like grain on the film, as well as some hairs on some films as well when we scan it. But this is okay. I mean, it's kind of a preference, but when it comes to low light situations like a party, which one of them is from, and then a concert, you really don't have a choice to be able to bring more light into the situation. So you need to be able to have film that's very sensitive to light to be able to pick up those really small gradients and those small different tones. So As you can see in the top, the party one, that little bit of blur that's coming in, that comes in when somebody's moving, and it's called motion blur, which can be helped and can be solved by having a different kind of a shutter speed. So your shutter speed essentially is going to be how fast you take a picture. It's technically how fast the mirror flips open and then closes to be able to expose the film that's behind it. And if you haven't looked at your cameras yet, you have mirrors in them with these things right here. And these will flip when you take a photo, exposing your film to light. And that's essentially what a photo is. And shutter speed can be able to range from 30 seconds to 1/1000th of a second, depending on the kind of camera that you have. But depending on how much light you have to take more time for the photos. So as a general rule, to be able to avoid that kind of motion blur that you saw in the last photo, as well as the photo of the cat eating the grass, naturally as one cat does, you want to be a little bit faster than 1/125th of a second or 1/200th of a second. Those are kind of good ground rules to be able to be faster than that. Otherwise, if you're slower than that, you're going to get some handshake and some motion blur if your subject is going to be moving or is a person or an animal, stuff like that. But having a faster shutter speed means that you're taking a picture faster. Pretty basic concept. So in this bottom middle photo, which Joe took, thank you, Joe, you can see that basically the frame of the subject is in one spot. The skateboard is not moving, the person is not moving, it's basically frozen in space, meaning that it was a fast enough shutter speed to be able to freeze his motion, even though he was going, I'm assuming pretty fast considering he's in the air. So that's really what you want to be able to kind of pay attention to when you're changing your shutter speed. But there's some advantages to having a slower shutter speed. If you have a tripod to be able to keep your camera, which we aren't expecting you to have one, but if you have one, you can keep your camera perfectly still, then being able to basically press the shutter if it's 5 seconds, 30 seconds, and it is able to then take all of the light from that time and put it onto the film. These are two really great photos from one of my friends, Monty, which it is capturing light trails, which is essentially just light that's moving within the photo. A lot of the times it's cars just because they're nice modes of transportation and have a lot of light in them as well. So these are some fun things to do with a very slow shutter speed. I think these were taken at a 15th of a second, and then the left one was taken at like 2 seconds. So here's another example of having different shutter speeds. Anybody want to guess which one's the faster shutter speed? You don't have to. So a lot of landscape photographers will actually choose intentionally to have a slower shutter speed to be able to get this more velvety and smooth effect of water, because water moves so fast within rivers, streams, anywhere really. You can capture, like on the far left side, you can capture the water basically within the moment that it's moving, or you can be able to leave it open for a little bit longer to be able to have the water moving to make a more velvety smooth look. This is a pretty cool concept, and I like to do it in a lot of photos, but I mean, having a slower shutter speed does mean that you have to change another setting, which is your aperture. So aperture is a little bit more complicated because it's kind of a backwards way of thinking. But essentially it's how big or small your opening in your camera is. This chart at the bottom, doing great on words, kind of demonstrates what that means. Weirdly enough, having a smaller number in aperture means that you have a larger hole. Having a larger number means that you have a smaller hole. So obviously these holes in the actual lenses is dictating how much light is able to reach the film. So having the smaller hole, like at an f32, means that you're going to be getting less light. Having f-stop of a 1.4 It's going to mean that you're going to get more light and the hole is going to be bigger. The other way that this translates into your photos is that it also affects your depth of field. So the more light you let in, the more shallow depth of field is. Do you guys all know what depth of field is? I'm assuming we're all older than like 15, so awesome, great. So having a more shallow depth of field means that there's going to be less in focus within your photos. Having a more, like a higher depth of field means that from the beginning, like where my hand is up here, and then from back here, all of it is in focus. So you have a larger depth of field. This can be used in a lot of different ways. So the two left photos are essentially the same photo. Actually, it's taken from the same spot, same exact settings, but I decided to put my focal length or my focal like points at a different spot. And so, since I had such a shallow aperture and had such a shallow depth of field, it was able to blur everything else but that really shallow area. I'm pretty sure I took this with a 1.4. And then on the landscape photo, like I said, landscape photos, it doesn't really make sense to only have the foreground at the bottom being able to be in focus, because how are you really supposed to see everything else that's in the background? So a lot of the times if you're taking landscape photos or really want to be able to have a large depth of field, you're going to need to be looking at your aperture. All right, and then here's some examples of some more shallow depth of field. I'm a really big fan of a low aperture. You'll also hear me say f-stop. F-stop and aperture are the same thing. I just kind of use them interchangeably. If it's confusing, just let me know and I'll just choose one. But with a shallow depth of field, you really are able to frame your subjects by being able to like create the blur around them, especially with the pine cones and those flowers in those photos. And then I was talking to Joe, but this one about the chip and this glass that I'm holding in the top left one, it's kind of an optical illusion because I decided that my focal point was going to be just that one chip and that one shatter in the glass. And you can kind of create optical illusions by having that one depth of field where basically that outer rim of the glass is completely transparent. Yeah, it is glass, but the crack in it is actually pretty clear. So there's some tricks that you can kind of be able to do. All right. But what's most important about both of these is that these two settings are working together to actually make a photo. And what's important about knowing how they work together is knowing if you're going to be underexposed or overexposed. Basically, that's just meaning if you're going to know that your photo is going to be white or if it's going to be completely dark and you can't see anything. And how you know that is going to be through a light meter. Have you guys been able to like look at your cameras and look through the viewfinder yet? Yes, no, yeah. Most cameras do have light meters. If you don't have one, we do have things for you to be able to use as alternate light meters. I have a handheld one. You can get apps on your phone. We can talk about that one-on-one just to see where you guys are at. But in general, I'm just going to be talking about light meters that are in camera. So a light meter shows how exposed your photo is going to be. Usually this meter is going to be either at the side of your, basically the viewfinder, the bottom, or it might be on a separate part of your camera, as in this other one on the side. It can either be shown by just a dial that will move up and down, or it'll be shown, sorry. Okay, Zoom, I don't want a gift at the moment. Thank you though. Okay. Or it can be shown by like a physical dial that has numbers on it. What you're aiming for is to get that dial and that actual meter to be right in the center. As you can see at the bottom left picture, that dial is like right in the center. That open space is about a stop below and a stop above being perfectly exposed, which means that it's pretty okay to stay within that area to be able to have an evenly exposed photo that's not going to be too dark and it's not going to be too light. Same when it comes to the metering, that's the -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. you kind of want to stay within the 0 range or the -1 or the +1, just to be able to get a photo that's not too dark, not too light. Same concept. But how these all work together is that if you're changing your shutter speed, you most likely are going to be needing to change your aperture. It's going to be a little bit tricky until you actually get film in your camera, or if you don't have a battery in your camera, you can't really check your light meter. But it's difficult to say how your light meter is going to react to photos. A general rule, just as science works, whatever you are looking at through your viewfinder is how the light meter is actually going to respond. So if you're looking down at the ground with your camera and it's dark and the dial is all the way at the bottom, that doesn't mean that the dial is going to be all the way at the bottom when you bring your camera up and there's more light that's accessing the film. So what's important is that you always look through your viewfinder. I know I have to say this because I feel like some people will forget, but you have to look through your viewfinder and test to see what your shot will look like before you even take a photo, just to make sure that what your settings are will actually make a good photo and make a photo that's properly exposed. And if it's not, if the dial's too far up, try changing your shutter speed. Maybe you need a little less of the light because it's too bright. So make it faster to bring it into the middle. If you're having too much light and your shutter speed's already as fast as it can be, then you need to make the opening in the actual lens smaller to be able to let in less light. It's a little bit confusing, but we're here to help. All right. And you're now getting into the fun. Well, here's an example first of an under and an overexposed photo. As you can see, it's like one of them has so many blacks that you can't really tell what's going on in that area. It's just dark. As on the other end, when it's overexposed, it's blown out. And if you're printing a photo, basically it's the space where a printer doesn't put any ink because it's just white. So it's a good rule of thumb, really never to actually point your camera at a light source like the sun or a light in general, because a lot of the times your light meter will actually be picking up that specific light source and nothing that's around it. So just as a general rule, how are we feeling? Good? Decent? Any questions? Anything? I love all the thumbs up. Is this how my college teachers felt? Man, crazy. I do expect you guys to ask questions at the end, even if it has nothing to do with this class. I expect something, even if it's like, what's your favorite color?
I have a question with shutter speed.
Of
So,
course.
so you kind of talked about, how you get different amounts of blurs for things that are moving, kind of based on the shutter speed.
Mhm.
Obviously, when you're looking through your camera, you like won't be able to see that blur. So do you get to a point where, there's not, I imagine in the beginning, it's probably some guesswork to see how much blur you're going to get from a moving object, but I'm guessing that there's a point where you kind of know based on either the movement or the shutter speed you're using.
Yeah, basically, I mean, it is a little bit of guesswork. Obviously, the movement depends on the subject. If you're taking a picture of a moving car that's on the interstate, it's gonna have a lot more blur than if you're taking a picture of somebody that's walking and you have the same
Right.
exact settings. So it's kind of just dictated on how fast your subject is moving. If you wanted to try, there's a specific way of capturing a motion blur but keeping with your subject called panning. Essentially that means, just hold my camera because why not? It essentially means if my subject is in front of me and my subject is moving this fast, instead of just keeping my camera here while it's moving, I'm actually going to be moving my camera with the subject matter, and being able to get them moving in focus while your whole entire background and everything else is blurred.
Okay.
You want to try that, you can. But yeah, just as a general rule, when it comes to at least like human bodies, stay above 1/125, or depending on your camera, 1/200. Just because that kind of accounts for handshake, breathing, just general body movements that we have as humans. I have a really nasty habit of holding my breath when I take photos. So I can and have sometimes gone down to a 60th of a second, and it's been successful, but in general, it's kind of just a good idea to play it a little bit safer. And also with this first test roll, I want to emphasize, if you guys want to try things that you never thought about trying, go for it. And I will hit on that more because I am always here to push for people trying things that they don't always expect or don't always understand, because we're also here to give you another role at the end, and then being able to try something different and being able to work on what you want to do better next time. So anything else? Anybody got anything else? Actually, yeah, I'm gonna leave this next 5 minutes open for questions, and then we can jump on to the next one. Does anybody got any?
I think the camera I bought is just like a point and shoot. Is that what it's called? I don't think it has like all those settings, but my mom does have an old one that has all those settings. Should I use that one instead, or like, I guess I'm very brand new to this, so I don't know.
It's okay. Joe's gonna have a different answer than I do. And
Can we both answer this one?
Possibly, man. So I'm okay with you using a point and shoot. That's fine by me. Joe almost made it a necessity that you could not take this class if you had a point and shoot. I am showing the receipts. But if you want to try, you are totally able to use like your mom's old one as well. If anything, if you really wanted, you could possibly just add a few extra dollars into your tuition, and we may be able to give you 2 rolls to be able to try out both. We can talk about that, but it's kind of up to you. Yeah, we would love that. But do you guys all think that you do have the accessibility to be able to change shutter speed and aperture? I think Lauren and Jared, I'm pretty sure both of you do, from what photos that you've shown me of your guys' cameras.
I do have the opportunity to do that, and also based on my experience, I hate point and shoot cameras, considering that was the first film camera I used. So if you can, definitely get one where you can change the settings.
I don't know. I think point and shoots are fun. I actually just had Joe develop a roll of film that's from a point and shoot, like one that you can buy at Walmart, that my parents found in the basement, said that it expired in 2007, but still had shots on it. So I finished it up and found photos of me as like a 5-year-old child on it. And it was like, this is weird.
I think point and shoots can be fine. The thing is just like, they're so, like most of them are so cheaply made that they suck.
It
If I can
happens.
throw my,
Go for it, Joe.
yeah. I think the main difference between point and shoots and kind of the more SLR, the one where you can change all of your settings, they both lend, those 2 different styles of cameras really lend themselves to different shooting styles. The point and shoot is really good
Joe,
at hanging
hold on.
out. Well,
Pause.
You're echoing.
You are so.
I'm echoing.
Do you have your
Yeah.
mic on your headphones and your computer on?
No, these are just headphones. Oh gosh.
This has literally never happened before. And
Sorry.
other calls.
What do I do? Is this better?
Do you have 2 microphones working at the same time?
I do have a microphone on this laptop and right here. But they shouldn't both be going, I wouldn't imagine.
They both are.
Even still?
Yes.
Unless the volume is turned up on the computer and we're hearing. Oh wait,
Just-
no, that doesn't make any
Just
sense.
unplug your external microphone.
All right, I'll do that.
Joe.
Oh god.
There
Can
you
you
go.
hear me?
That's way better.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. No, my thoughts on point and shoot versus an SLR. I don't have any examples around me, but if an SLR is one where you have all of these settings, like you can adjust your aperture manually, you can adjust your shutter speed, like Allison's pointing up right now. Once you have all these options that you can configure personally, versus a point and shoot like Maya has, which is a much simpler camera where you just have usually just like have a shutter button, or even the camera that you tested. Sometimes you don't even have any buttons. Like it'll adjust your exposure automatically. It'll get your focus automatically.
Mhm.
Versus that SLR that we talked about, where you have to do all this yourself. I think these cameras are both really good for different situations. And they also both have like different build qualities. An SLR is going to have a better build quality. It's likely to have a glass and metal lens versus a point and shoot. It's going to have a plastic lens. But they both have good purposes. When I shoot a point and shoot, I'm shooting casual things. I'm shooting my friends when I'm like hanging out, getting like Wendy's with them. I'm taking them to parties because I'm not worried about like getting the right amount of light. I can just take a shot. I can just take a photo on a point and shoot. I can just point and shoot, and it's so simple, and that's nice. Whereas with an SLR, I can more carefully compose my image. I can choose exactly which aperture I want for my depth of field. I can choose my shutter speed. Do I want to have everything crisp and in focus, or do I want a little bit of blur to depict motion in my shot? It's just kind of nice having those like options with an SLR that you don't get with a point and shoot. They both lend themselves to different shooting styles. They're both equally valid. Although I agree with what Jared said that point and shoots are usually a lower build quality, so which can
But-
kind of suck.
On the flip side, because we figured out that Joe and I oppose each other on some opinions when it comes to photography, your photography is still valid and is valued and is important regardless of what you shoot on. Even if it is literally a crappy plastic camera.
I'll
It's
be the
still a
judge of
photo.
that.
Sure, Joe can judge all of your guys' photography.
I'm a harsh critic. Oh, I'm really excited. The fourth meet. Yeah,
Please don't scare them.
you guys have heard. Okay, no, I'm not going to scare anybody, but you guys have read the schedule. You know that there's this meeting. There's 2 in-person meetings where we'll be shooting film and then dropping off the film so we can develop it. The 4th meeting is the one that I'm the most excited about. It's another Zoom meeting at the end of the class. You'll have your shots back. And essentially, and don't get too scared by this, but we're going to kind of be reviewing some shots from everyone's roles. Like you guys will each choose one of your favorite shots. We will choose one of your favorite shots as well. And we're going to discuss them and what we think about them. And I'm not going to be mean. I'm not going to be a critic. But I just want, I will be supportive.
I know you want to be supportive. We'll also have just a conversation one-on-one with each of you and asking for what you were looking for in that conversation. If you're looking for constructive criticism on what you can do better, then yeah, we'll give that. If you're looking for what did you did great and you want to like pursue and what other ideas that you should try, we'll give that as well. If you have no idea, then we'll give you a mixed bag of whatever. And I may give you like 5 references of photographers to look into if you wanted to know more. So anyways, I'm surprised we have not been kicked off of the next one. Do you guys need like a 2-3 minute break to do whatever you need to do? You good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do we want to, because I am scared that we're going to get cut off. Actually, no, I think the present that Zoom sent me was to continue the call.
Yeah.
It was.
Weird. Did you get that too? Did everyone get that?
Yeah, we all got that.
No.
Oh, I thought it was
Well,
just
I didn't see it, but I've hosted a Zoom meeting before, and that happened to me the first time I did it. So
weird. Why did I get kicked off of my conference calls with teachers in college? Okay, let's just continue. So now we are going to be getting into kinds of photography. This is where I get excited because like, there's so many different things, and we're not just looking at my work. We can look at other work. But it's a lot less stressful. Of course, like I said, don't gotta take notes. But there's just so many kinds of photography. And I think that people get very wrapped up in this idea that photography is just such a normalized concept nowadays. And like, it's such a normalized thing. Everyone can take photos on their phone. You see photos on billboards, magazines, literally everywhere. Social media is full of images, and it's sometimes not really like looked at as there's kinds of photography that you can kind of start going into. So just as like some basic types, we have landscape, portrait, street fashion photography. I know that's kind of like big on TikTok and stuff like that. Not huge on TikTok, but people have told us that we should make a TikTok. you guys should help with that. We got action, candid, deadpan, conceptual, studio, marketing, product, documentary, photojournalism, fashion photography in general. Literally so many kinds that all have small differences that sometimes blur into each other, and it's really very confusing. And a lot of them are self-explanatory: landscape, nature, architecture, photojournalism. So those are things that are kind of already in our vernacular. But what I also listed was contemporary photography, because a lot of the times when we think of photography, it's in that same historical or documentary sense, where it's personal things or incredibly impersonal things that are completely apart from us, like advertisements that are trying to be personal. But photography has actually been incredibly integral in the development of contemporary art to begin with. And I just think that that's very interesting, but it's the youngest medium to be created. I mean, you have painting and sculpture and literally things that have been around for thousands of years. But photography is the youngest. And as it being the youngest, the changes and developments in the way that we take photos and what we take photos, and also how we develop photos, has been able to change within the contemporary age as well. And so I just want to be able to kind of touch on a few topics, not topics, but a few kinds of photography, just to kind of give you guys an idea as to there's more than just going out with your friends and taking photos, which of course, not going to bash on you if you do that. That's totally fine. But I mean, I'm a big fan of taking photos of my cats and plants. But then when it comes to like other photos, I love chairs. Like I love chairs. Okay, there we go. I have a tattoo of a chair because I just love taking photos of chairs. So it's just, there's more than just being able to take photos that you would with your phone. So let's get into it. And if you ever want to like know more kinds of photography, hit me up, because I'm obviously talking so much about it. So to begin with, we have the general idea of contemporary photography. And honestly, photography wasn't really seen as like an art form until the mid 1900s. So not that long ago, usually when like our grandparents were taking photos with their cameras, those kinds of things. And it was more just seen as a way to document things, as a way to, take photos like you saw in the beginning, just to document that a person was alive, and to be able to take photos for a newspaper, those kinds of things. But as artists kind of developed the medium, they wanted to be able to explore what it could do. So they decided to be able to experiment, which has led to having so many kinds of film and so many kinds of cameras that all vary in how they take photos and what kind of photos it ends up with. So on the left, we have a photo from Man Ray. He is a really big photographer when it comes to just bringing it into the actual art scene. He hung out with different people like Stieglitz and a lot of other names that you guys might not know, but he really brought photography into the limelight. His work has been spanning from, he was born in the 1800s, but it has been spanning from like 1915 to 1960s, and then early on in the 70s when he actually passed away. And a lot of it is just kind of experimental. This photo was taken with a Polaroid camera, something that we still use today, being able to take photos, and that was in 1959. And then we have on the right-hand side, William Eggleston, who is honestly one of the biggest pioneers of accessible color film. So really bringing it into like the everyday life, like going out and taking photos with your friends and of your family, and taking photos when you're on a road trip, those kinds of things. And he even has series where he just went to the countryside and took photos of what he saw. But he kind of centralized the idea that like, it's not just taking photos of a place, it could be more than that. This is one of his photos. He has some really, really great work. Like I said, I suggest looking up all of these names. They're just cool people. Then we get into portrait, which is something that we more commonly know of. But I wanted to throw a curveball in here which is Nikki S. Lee. But portraits are essentially just photos of people. I also mentioned candid photography, which is also essentially portraits of people that aren't set up and that are just taken offhandedly, which is considered a candid photo, but we're not going to get super into that. But on the topic of Nikki S. Lee, she's very interesting and possibly controversial in multiple ways, but she went out on what she calls our projects. She completely immersed herself within a societal group of people, changing her clothing, her makeup, how she acted, how she sounded, everything about her, she designed to that societal group of people and that culture. She introduced herself to these people, said that she's a photographer, and then acted in that role for a long time, sometimes even months, to be able to kind of just build a relationship with these people, and then was able to take self-portraits. She is both the middle woman in this picture and the woman sitting on the arm of the chair. And I think it's very interesting and a little bit controversial. Joe says that she's not a photographer, or she's not the photographer of these photos because she didn't take it, even though she orchestrated all of them. As well as it's controversial because, I mean, she's a Korean woman that's in what nowadays we would call blackface, which the people in these photos have actually spoken up and said that they don't even consider it blackface because she never at any point was using it for her gain, but was using it to be able to connect with people in a human level. And when she needed to, she advocated for them. So that's just another example of portrait. And then we have on a different side, Robert Mapplethorpe, which he's a very interesting photographer, but I will give a content warning. If you want to look more into his photos, most of his work is exploring how sexual identity is perceived within portraits and within people, and how it's shown in photos. And he also was a part of the gay community as well as the BDSM community. So there are some explicit images that he has there. But he was one of the first openly gay men to take photos of the BDSM and gay community before and on the lower end of the height of the AIDS epidemic. Unfortunately, he did pass away because of AIDS complications, and a lot of his work was not uncovered until after the fact. But his work has been able to show how sexual identity and really that whole area of people's lives are often not seen in photos, and how they can actually be shown within portraits themselves. Wonderful, wonderful photographer. Highly suggest looking up his work. They're very beautiful photos, including studio work and still lifes as well. But yes, content warning. And then we get into the conceptual storytelling, which this is a little bit more out there. I will say that just as a preference. I also really love storytelling photography, but it's the basic idea that you can be able to tell stories and tell a concept in photos that isn't always seen as truthful or real. Scientifically, this is a fun science fact, but humans actually perceive black and white photos to be honest and truthful because we have been programmed or basically trained to believe anything that's in newspapers that are black and white. So when people started actually manipulating photos and creating these scenes that are confusing and disorientating and don't make any sense, people started to really wonder what was going on and being able to kind of create their own stories because of this. So Gregory Crutzen is one of those photographers where he basically makes like a movie set with artificial lighting, actors, the whole entire set's fake. All of it is just fake, but he creates this scene to bring people in and start guessing as to what's happening. He never reveals what's going on, never connects any of his photos to different photos. It's honestly because he wants to be able to just lead his audience to making their own guessing games and trying to build their own story themselves. Other side of that is with Jeff Wall, very interesting photographer. All of these are interesting photographers. I should stop saying that. But he really likes to be able to blur the line between searching for photos to take and making photos to take, where you deal with the hypothetical scenarios that could be taking like the actual interest of photos. So if you stumble upon this kind of a scene where people have lost a bunch of papers while they're out on a walk by a canal and everybody's trying to get the papers, it's a hypothetical scenario that would be interesting to take photos of, but he has decided to create this scenario himself. But it still kind of blurs the line of, is this something that you actually stumble upon and search for, or is this something that you created? Now, this is the last example for this. It's just my favorite kind, so of course I'm going to explain it. This is my favorite photographer. So yeah, I'm a little biased on it. But within this specific series, he was able to explore where he grew up in the desert in, I believe, California. But he went back there after many, many years of not returning and having an abusive childhood, and was searching to be able to understand his identity and searching for who he was by just going around this space. So not only is his photos a way to tell the story of who he used to be as a child growing up in this space, but it's also telling the story of how he is returning, confronting that part of his identity and trying to make sense of it. And this story is an example where he doesn't use any people. It's just space and what's there. Love this series in general. This ladder is tattooed on my arm because I just love it so much. But it's also, it was on view at the Sheldon, and it was kind of the first, at least for me, the first point where I realized that photography could be more than just like taking photos for photojournalism or marketing for people to use. It could be incredibly complex and conceptual and have ties to who we are as people and who we are to our connections with others and our connections to places. So I just really love it. And it's an interesting way to be able to tell somebody's identity and story. Then moving on to architecture, we have on the left-hand side some photos of some water towers. A lot of the times when people think of architecture photography, it's just walking around and like taking photos of buildings, which you can do. It's like, that's totally fine. But I wanted to bring two examples of things that like we wouldn't commonly think of. And so Bernd and Hilla Betcher, they're the photographers who took the photos of the water towers. They specifically went into the countryside and took photos of silos, water towers, grain elevators, and then other like urban structures that had been abandoned. And they were doing this in the middle of the century when the US was really, and other countries were really starting to grow from their industrial age into a technological age. So they were trying to highlight these structures that were like not in use anymore, but are still permanent places that like people have built, even if they aren't even in use. They went on to teach at the Dusseldorf school in Germany, who that school has literally created so many really great photographers. So I highly recommend looking into them. And then on the other side, we have the Atom Bomb Sky by William Klein. He's another photographer who does a lot of street photography, nightlife, and does a lot of work centralized in New York City. And a lot of it has to do with like the nightlife and how people are interacting with the architecture, as it's like a very, I don't know, it's very focused on the buildings. You don't see a lot of green in it. And so just that kind of relationship of people living in cities and what a city is. And so this is actually a photo that is an acquisition of the Sheldon. So you can see it in person if you want to go to the Sheldon. It's really cool as well. Huge, I'm a big advocate for being able to see art in person. So highly suggest going. And now we got documentary photography. which will go back to the idea that point and shoots are bad, because all of these photos are done with auto flash, autofocus point and shoots. I just think they're cool. I'm gonna get some water. So a lot of the times when we think about documentary, we think of people taking photos of historical events, big events. I mean, pretty sure people taking photos at the funeral of the Queen's husband, Prince Philip. There we go. A lot of those photos are going to be like in history books documenting this time. But I, like with everything else, I want to be able to bring in the flip side of that. That documentary doesn't have to be what we always think of it. So with this series by Martin Parr, it was created in the mid-90s, which 90s are coming back, so why not bring them back here? And the general theme of these photos is just overall like a kitschy feel, kitschy or campy, if you know what those terms are, but pretty much involves a lot of like junk food, tourist traps, tacky things that like you would commonly see as tourist traps or like tourist induced things when you were traveling. And specifically as a British person, like what you see when you're traveling to the US. And so he treated all of his photos with the same type of care by having usually the flash on, having a very close subject matter where it's cropped in very closely to it, very, very heightened colors, almost to the point of it being like way too extreme. But it is an example of being able to show how you can still take hundreds of photos of like this idea of experiences and then being able to have them be documentary photos in which the combination of all of them together can offer one dynamic but very subjective view of the world. So it's a little bit more conceptual when it comes to that end, but like, I don't know. I love them. Like at one point, I think he went to like a nudist beach and you just like see exactly what you would think you would see with people like coming to a nudist beach for the first time or going to the Grand Canyon or like going to Las Vegas, like the very expected kinds of photos he was able to just make true while using a point and shoot. Also, 90s aesthetic is so good. And that's all I have. Do we have any questions? Literally about anything.
I guess I just want to say I'm really excited, and I think I will bring both the cameras because I would like to learn how to use both of them. So let me know how much extra I'll need to pay, and I can do that.
Yes. Woo! That's so good. Do we got anything else? Literally about anything.
So if you're shooting in like low light,
Yes.
you have to use the right film. Or if you like adjust your aperture or your shutter speed, would that help? If
Yes.
you're like using like a 100 film or something or a 200 film.
If you're using a 100 film, that's going to be pretty tricky to be able to get like even photos like in the setting that I'm currently in with just my lamp on, without getting a little bit of motion blur. You would need to have a really low aperture, so having a very large opening. So if you can, like a 1.4, to having a shutter speed that's really slow to be able to let as much light in within that slower time.
Sure.
If you are wanting to take, like, if you intentionally want to take low light photos, my best advice is to start with a more sensitive film. So start with an 800 or a 1600,
Okay.
which we can like, we have access to, and there's ways to be able to get film. It's just we don't have access to a lot of film to be able to have a class with, so that's why we're all just doing 100 speed film. So
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
There
awesome.
is another thing you can consider for low light, and that's this.
Yes.
Off flash.
A flash. You can even use, if you want, which I have done this many a times, usually using the flashlight on your phone to light a subject for that time period. So
Well, Joe, what I was thinking is like at night with the lights at work,
Oh yeah.
like that kind of light. I don't think a flash would be good
Well, yeah.
to capture that whole,
So we can
I guess. But
really quickly touch on this really quick because it's kind of a whole thing on a long exposure photography. And basically, yeah, if to shoot, like Allison mentioned earlier in the presentation, film, like you need light to do photography, and you need a lot of light to do film photography. Film it's an older medium. It's not particularly sensitive. Even the most sensitive films just don't do low light that well. They can, but you really have to work with it. You really have to like have the right tools at your disposal, like like a tripod is always going to be a safe bet, so that you can go to those lower shutter speeds without the general like movement of your hands or your heartbeat becoming an issue. So yeah, tripod's smart. A shutter release cable if you're getting really into it. A proper light meter, but you have an app on your phone, Colin. That'd be fine. That'd be well enough. And I mean, if you really want to do a shot of the lights at work at night, I mean, I can lend you my tripod, and you can take that shot.
Cool.
Like we're literally here to help you guys achieve whatever you want, because what you guys want to take photos and want to do is like, it's so exciting. Like we want to be able to do that for you. So literally, if you need a tripod, we can get you a tripod. We have
Also, what's Jared doing over there?
what?
I see Jared with that camera.
Don't mind me. I'm just messing around. I have film in here right now, so
that's good. And yeah, I mean, Jared, you're always welcome. I know there's a dark room and everything at Wesleyan, but Juan's also totally fine with like letting me use it, and we can be able to take your film there too. So
yeah, that's what I've been doing. I've been working with Juan and been developing film in the darkroom and stuff like that. So
nice.
One general question that I do have: if you guys have your cameras on you, do you know where your battery would be? Because I am helping Lauren with this. Generally, there's going to be a small compartment. I wish I had. I'm gonna have to turn this.
You might have to use a quarter to open it.
Yep. So this is gonna be my film hatch. Batteries are tiny, like tiny, depending on your camera that you use. That's what I use for one of my film cameras, as well as this film camera uses some nice other kinds of batteries. And if you guys don't know where your batteries and what kind of battery takes, we can be able to like get in contact and be able to find it for you. I have a couple extra, pretty sure, that work that I would be willing to lend out. Yes, Lauren?
I realized I found where the battery goes. I just can't get it open.
Oh, it's so hard. Use a penny.
A penny? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was on, which was a horrible idea.
Oh no.
There's also the risk with older cameras that if you can't get your battery unstuck, there's the possibility that if it's a used camera, there's a battery in there that has corroded to the point that you're going to have a big difficulty opening up that battery compartment. And you can try like mixes of like vinegar or alcohol or just all sorts of different things to try to get in there.
Yeah. And if it comes down to like one of your guys' cameras is corroded and you can't use it, we have cameras for you guys to use. At least I do. So
I got super lucky with mine, for example, because the battery was in it and it was a little corroded, but none of the like parts in the camera, like all of it was fine, except it was a pain to find the right battery, and I ended up just having to order it online.
But like, if
Oh yeah, that's the worst part.
Some batteries you will have to order online, which I can also help with because I have a gift card that I'd be willing to use on you guys. Sometimes you gotta order batteries from Germany. Like, there's some weird cameras out there that are not made anymore that you have to find very specific parts for. But there's also some really easy cameras where we can be able to just use it. This is a Canon camera that takes all of my Canon lenses. It's great. So, what other questions do we got regarding anything? I'll also go back to the tips/questions page. Anything?
I got something I would like to say quick. We do have a Discord. It is kind of like Zoom, but like more of a chat room vibe.
You don't have
And
to show
we
your face.
we use it to. This is where we talk about film and photography in general.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm looking at it on my other monitor, and we're having a conversation about just scanning negatives, and it's all sorts of weird stuff like that. Like it'll be scanning, and then we'll be like critiquing photos, and then we'll be talking about like making photo books. It's here, Allison's showing it right now.
Yeah,
This is the Film Photo LNK Discord right here.
where we just talk literally about anything. We'd share photos. This is actually a photo that one of our members took of light trails because I asked if anyone had any. But talk about so many different things. Not a lot of photos in here, but they're all up here. There we go.
I took that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys are obviously all invited to that just to kind of come hang out with other like Lincoln photographers and just get involved in that community. Kind of see what people are talking about, what they're doing. We have a meeting every Monday, and you guys can even come to that where we just talk about stuff. It's literally just like every Monday there's a meeting where like film photographers in Lincoln come together, talk about film, talk about shooting it, talk about buying new cool cameras or like what gear they're using or what kind of shots they're trying to take the next week. Just stuff like that. And yeah, I can if you guys want that invite, just send me an email. Like respond to the emails you've been getting, and that's me, and I will send you that invite.
And if you ever don't want to email, I'm assuming you're all following the Instagram. If you're not, you really should. I know we haven't posted a lot lately, but we are going to, since we've started classes, we're really excited to be able to post more work. We have like so many just photographers from Nebraska to be able to show their work, and you guys can be included in that. We're not expecting like, oh, you have to know what you're doing or you have to be an expert in this to show your photos. Nah. But yeah, you can message us there. Both Joe and I check the account pretty much daily, honestly. But yeah, this is your Discord. Come join. You don't have to say anything. We have a lot of members that don't say anything. It's okay. And then just as like the last few things, I guess I'm not going to share my screen again, but some tips. Don't leave your film in your car because when it gets hot out, heat affects the chemicals on your film. You can if you want to get some like really weird outcomes, but try not to do it intentionally in general.
Ooh. Cold can also kill your battery. So like hot weather messes with your film. Cold weather can like completely kill the battery in your camera. Just better not to leave it in the car at all. Like
Yeah, but you can put film in the freezer because some people think that that's how you save film, like for years. But another tip, if you are scared to do it anyways because nobody's gonna say anything. In general, if you do it, then we're gonna be happy and excited. If you want to take these weird photos of tables in libraries, as Joe has done, go for it.
do that.
Why not? Nothing's holding you back. And we want to be able to.
invite
Yes.
for the Discord?
What was that?
I can't find the invite for the Discord.
I'll put an invite to the Discord in the chat right now. All you got to do is click it, and then you're in. Look at this. Bam.
Nice.
Click that, you're in.
Sweet. Thank
Go
you.
get it. There we go. Nice. Which you can, yeah, we do weekly meetings, like we said. We don't always do video unless we're like showing each other stuff. It's just overall fun. We don't even have to talk about classes in the meeting. I'm a very casual person and I would like to be like respected by you guys, but I also am a 23-year-old recent graduate from college, so like I'm not about to have some weird like superiority complex because I'm teaching class.
Hey, Lauren, you accidentally went into the voice chat in
Yes,
Discord,
I'm
by the way.
so sorry. I exited it.
I just
trying
wanted to
figure
make
out how
sure
to
you
end
knew.
So many things are happening. Does anybody else have anything at all? Questions? Comments? Concerns? You can just tell me that you hated it. It's okay if you did. I just really love photography and art history.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I guess I'm interested in doing like a conceptual or storytelling photography. So like how, I guess, do you have any tips or how to start with that?
Yeah, of course. Some tips just to like kind of start. I'm a big advocate for having journals. So possibly just having a space to be able to kind of write down scenarios or stories that you want to be able to kind of tell, even if they have no idea or no rhyme or reason. I love this kind of work. I mean, I even made a painting of a pie being smashed into a wall, like of a house. Love that painting. But like, it doesn't make any sense. And I was like, I just want to smash a pie into the side of a house, and that's all. So really just kind of start documenting and start writing your ideas, even if they are sounding really strange and really crazy. Just start on that. If you would like, I can give you a few other photographers to look into if you want to like see visual side to that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Do that. Yes, of course. But if you want to just focus on that, shoot a roll with the intention that every photo has something to do with the story or with that storyline. It might make it a little easier to be able to get done with a roll of film. It might make it a little bit harder. It kind of just depends. But having that intention and just kind of having the mindset of like, I want to create this story. What visuals do I need? And kind of just figuring that out is a great place to start. So.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Next Saturday is going to be great. I'm actually really looking forward to meeting downtown, shooting with y'all. We will see. Yeah, we'll make sure cameras work. We'll get you guys loaded up with film, and like basically, it can be as short as you want it to be. Like as well. Once we give you your film, you can basically leave. Like that's the thing. Like we're giving you the film, and we're giving you a week to shoot it. It'll be, I don't know, I think it's 24 shots. You got 24 shots to take in a week, and they better be good, or else you're not allowed to continue as part of our group. And I will kick you out. I only want to be friends with good photographers.
Okay.
That's true.
Disregard everything Joe says. I am the.
You want to hang out with bad photographers?
There's no power. Kidding.
Well, Joe, looks like we can be great friends then, because I'm amazing.
You're
welcome.
Literally, as long as you're putting effort into it, I'm gonna be so happy. I'm gonna be so proud of you. Like,
seriously.
As long as you don't need to be like the next. You don't need to be Robert Mapplethorpe at the very start. But
speaking of photography, though, I actually have a photo magazine on the way. So.
Hey, that's good. Also, yes. Cool. Thanks. Oh, well, he's gone. Anyways, but
yeah, I have to leave. Goodbye.
Everyone's gonna go. You can get out of here. You can get out of here.
If you guys gotta leave, you can. We're just talking. But yes, if you want to look into photo books and photo magazines and just like get into more content of like looking at photos other than just magazines that you have, I love all of these things very much so, and have them all on hand because I just do. So this is Lago. This is from that literally the specific series that I talked about. Wow. But yes, we're here for any kind of help. But Aldi, I will get that to you probably in the next couple days. I want to get some stuff together. But yeah, definitely
Sounds
just
good.
start kind of writing some stuff down and kind of just thinking about it. Something that it was hard for me to accept, but thinking about things to take photos of and like what you want to pursue in photography and art is still working on your art and still working on photography, even if you don't have like a physical thing to make up for it. So do not let that dismay you.